Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, what we are doing is we are going down under, mate. No, not Sydney, Melbourne. If any Australian made it this far into the video, congratulations. I won't be doing it again. In this old video, folks, I have a pretty tragic one for you. Wow, who could have guessed the true crime guy has another tragic story for you? This is the story of a woman who was walking home, as you do, as we all do every day. But she would not make it, like we've seen in a number of stories before. Also, you got the whole, someone tried to warn the authorities, but they didn't take them very seriously. That whole thing, which we've also seen before, so kind of really ticks all the boxes here. Let's give it a go. Not far from the University of Melbourne and the RMIT, that is the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology to you and me, look at you, lies the inner city suburb of Brunswick, known primarily for a thriving live music scene and artsy community. Basically, it's kind of everything you'd expect from an area, in close proximity to two major universities. The hipster highway, they call it. Do that, I have no idea if they actually do, but maybe they should. I'll leave it up to you. Now, while Brunswick, it's not a war zone by any stretch of the imagination, it has also had its kind of violent incidents, like the gangland killing of a guy named Lewis Moran in 2004. Moran himself had previously been linked to several gang-related murders around the Brunswick area. So not great. I mean, unless you're connected to like the Melbourne gangland scene. Although then also, maybe it's not great. It's kind of just like a melange of not great, but also great. Because Brunswick is considered a pretty safe place to drink and dance the night away. Boogie, ? You wanna? Why not? But in 2012, that image was shattered by a random act of violence that, if the Australian justice system had simply worked the way it's, kind of supposed to, would never have happened. That'd knock the Golden Gay time out of you pretty quick. Jill Meagher was born in 1982, and she had moved to Australia 3 years earlier in 2009. For what else but love? Jill had actually lived in Australia previously, and had spent the majority of her early childhood in Perth with her parents, George and Edith. They had moved there for George to take up a new job. In 1996, the family moved back to Jill's birthplace, that's Drogheda in County Louth in Ireland, and there she would start at the local school before eventually moving on to St Oliver's Community College. Jill, she finished her education in Ireland, earning a degree from UCD, University College Dublin, which is where she would meet the love of her life, Tom Meagher. After university, Jill would in fact go on to work for RTE, which is the public broadcaster. Essentially, it's kind of like Ireland's version of the BBC, but shite. Jill and Tom married in 2008 and moved to Australia in 2009. When Ireland, much like the rest of the world, was in the depths of, the recession and that whole rigmarole. A lot of Irish people actually moved to Australia around that time. Obviously, because I guess there was no jobs here. Did I? Have you seen their spiders? Did I? Fuck. So fast forward to a warm evening that was on the 21st of September 2012. And now, the 29-year-old Jill Meagher was a producer and occasional on-air personality with ABC Radio Melbourne. That evening, a Friday, she called her husband Tom to let him know she and a few friends from work were planning on a cocktail or two, and then asked if he fancied joining them for a few sups. He himself was grand, you go out, have a good time with your friends. And so, the group had drinks at the Brunswick Green on Sydney Road before rounding off their evening at Bar Etiquette, a bar literally 10 minutes walk from Jill's Luxway apartment, where Tom was waiting. As they called it a night around 1:30 AM, a friend offered to drop Jill off in a taxi, but being just minutes away from home, she turned down the offer in favour of a brief walk home. A walk she had taken 100 times before. Tom Meagher woke up on the sofa in the early hours of the 22nd of September with absolutely no sign of Jill in the house at all. She had not come home. A couple of unanswered phone calls later, and knowing that Jill wasn't the type, to just stay out all night and not to hear, a peep peep from her, he walked out. Like, this is in the very wee hours of the morning. He walked out thinking, well, maybe something, maybe she had an accident. Maybe she tripped and fell or slipped or something. Anything, not to think the worst case scenario. I'm sure she's fine. I'm sure she's around a corner. Let me have a look. Tom, he searched for a couple of hours, circling around and around the neighborhood, and he knew where she was last, and he knew it was only literally a couple of minutes walk, circling the block, kind of getting more frantic as the clock ticked. Finally, frantic and realizing something could be very, very wrong, around 6 AM, still trying to hide his panic as much as possible, Tom called the police and he reported his wife missing. The police were pretty quick to respond, well done lads, and set up line searches of the areas between where Jill was last seen and their home just a few minutes from the last bar she was seen at.
We've been contacting friends and people who might have been there and people who might have known where she's been, but we haven't really got anything. We've keep pushing the social media thing, and we've had posters up around Brunswick and stuff, but nothing's actually come to light yet, so we're obviously really worried, and we just would love to anyone who has any information at all or has, knows anything about that night to just contact us or the police.
Meanwhile, Tom, he called around Jill's friends, including, the people she'd been out drinking with just that night, but no dice. No one had seen or heard anything from Jill after she left bar etiquette and started, just walking home. The police searches turned up nothing. At a dead end and seriously concerned for Jill's safety, investigators contacted Jill's bank and mobile phone company, hoping there had been some activity and she'd chosen to go away. She just had enough. Something had happened, but it happened by choice. Things happen, and as shitty as that would be for Tom, it was a better alternate than what the police were already beginning to think happened that night. Bank inquiries, they would turn up nothing. There had been no movement, money withdrawn, ATM usage, any of that sort of dealios, but her phone had moved. But not in the direction of her apartment. It had moved ways away.
Police are looking into bank records today to see if there's any activity on anything. So hopefully they get a location off that if the bank card has been used, because that was the only thing that was with her, the bank card and the phone. She left her purse at home. So hopefully something's picked up with that.
Tom, what are you going through?
Hell. It's just devastating, but yeah, just trying to push on as much as possible.
What's keeping you going?
Just hope somebody saw something, or she just walked through the door.
Early on, the investigation focused, as it always does, on, the closest family. And Jill and Tom's family lived back in Ireland. So Tom, it's always the husband. It's always, come on, I've seen this movie before. Always the husband. In fact, the early chatter, the social media was actually, Tom, he clearly must have done something to his wife, and now he was, appealing for information. They were probably kind of like, they were licking their chops at the idea, hoping that he had done something, because we've seen this kind of story in Australia even before. I don't know if you remember a case I covered a couple of years ago, Alison Baden Clay, her husband Jared Clay did the whole thing. He killed her and then did the whole, I hope she turns up. That Tom had done something to Jill and had concocted this whole disappearance as a cover. But it was nope, not that story. Thanks, pal. But people didn't want to think. They never want to think. Nobody in the right mind wants to think that a woman just walking home alone could be the victim of an attack by a complete stranger. No, she must have known the person. Therefore, if she knew the person, it was personal. I'm safe. I don't know anybody like that. I'm not in danger. But if it was a stranger and it happened to her, it could happen to anybody. And throwing fuel on the already raging social media fire, routine police searches of Jill and Tom's apartment were caught on camera, and the online witch hunt threatened to spin out of control. He was convicted, by keyboard warriors when the investigation was still beginning. Those TikTok dipshits probably would have released his social security number already.
Irish woman Jill Meagher was last seen in the early hours of Saturday morning. Police hold serious concerns for her welfare.
It's been more than 40 hours now and Thomas Meagher still hasn't seen or heard from his wife.
She's my best friend. She's you know, she's just, this isn't something she doesn't do. So, yeah. Excuse me, sorry.
29-year-old Jill, an Irish national employed at the ABC, was out drinking with friends on a typical Friday night at her local bar Etiquette on Sydney Road, Brunswick. It was around 2 a.m. when she decided to leave and make the 5-minute walk home.
She was with another group of friends, well, the same group of friends there, and then the last person to see her got in a cab, and she was going to go walk home, and she hasn't been seen since.
Friends say Jill would often take a shortcut through this laneway off Sydney Road near Safeway. Police are now reviewing CCTV cameras.
I have a feeling like somebody did something to her, or she's, you know, I just don't know where she is. I'd love to just know where she is or what happened. Or...
Tom, however, to the dismay of many, he could be ruled out fairly quickly. Jill's phone had pinged at Hope Road, near the couple's apartment on Lux Street, before moving north along the Tullamarine Freeway at around 4:30 a.m, before the signal cut out near Gisborne, a small town 33.5 miles northwest of Melbourne. That just happened to be right when Tom had been out searching for Jill around Sydney Road and had been caught clearly on CCTV. He simply couldn't have had anything to do with Jill's disappearance. By Monday morning, Jill had been missing for more than 48 hours, and apart from the general direction of where her mobile phone had gone, investigators had very little to go on. That is, until they got an unexpected 911 call from the public.
There's been a new development in the search for missing Melbourne woman Jill Meagher.
Someone cutting through an alleyway to Hope Road had found a woman's handbag, a handbag with an ABC worker's ID card inside. Police responded and took Tom to check it out and see if he could identify any of the items. He quickly confirmed it belonged to Jill. A crime scene specialist brought in to help out with the scene analysis found several unsmoked cigarettes and a pencil with the ABC logo laying on the ground not far from where the handbag had been placed. Nearby, this specialist, he pointed to a flattened, darkened section of grass, and he said it looked like to him what he'd seen many times before, the scene of a sexual assault. Perhaps even more worrying though was the handbag appearing itself, because the morning of, when the search immediately began, the police had searched that alleyway, and they were they were dead sure it had not been there, you know, when they had looked previously. So where did it come from? Did the killer come back? You know, leave it back there? Was it like the BTK killer, you know, do you want to play a game? You know, doing some kind of weird, sick shit? It was actually a lot more stupid than that, if you can believe it. It turned out that a local shopkeeper, on the Saturday morning, when they were opening up their business, had found Jill's handbag lying outside front and had, you know, opened the shop, found a handbag, took it in, didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until the following Monday morning that this shopkeeper was on the phone to their daughter, who mentioned to them about Jill Meagher disappearing in that exact area. And so, well, the shopkeeper got spooked and were like, oh, fuck. And so they just got the handbag out, went back to the alley where they found it, and were like, whoops, just leave that there. Bad idea. Silly. Stupid even. Moronical. Even with the handbag discovery, the investigators, though, were still unsure of where Jill was and if she was alive. Suspicions of foul play were further aroused when on Tuesday morning, an employee of the Duchess Boutique, a bridal shop on Sydney Road, not far from the bar where Jill was last seen, handed over to police a CCTV recording from the Saturday night. CCTV captured a man in a blue hoodie and jeans pacing back and forth on Sydney Road. Minutes later, Jill, on her walk home, passed the shop and appeared to talk to the man in the hoodie. Detectives quickly made him the main suspect and target of the investigation and set about trying to identify the mystery man, at the same time debating whether or not to release the images to the public. They knew the likelihood of Jill being alive was slim. They also knew that if she was alive and being held somewhere, releasing the image could push them to harm her in order to cover their tracks. In the end, the decision was made to release the CCTV, along with an appeal to the public for any information that could help them find the man in the blue hoodie as he quickly became known. I would have gone for the blue bastard, but to each their own. It would be another video, though, in fact, that would provide clues as to Jill's whereabouts. See, when following the route Jill's phone had taken before the signal died, police found a worrying crossover. At the same time as cell phone data placed Jill's phone on the Tullamarine Freeway, a CityLink camera logged a car belonging to a man named Adrian Bayley travelling in the same direction. 41-year-old Adrian Bayley was already known to the police because he was a straight-up piece of shit. Bayley's long criminal history began at age 18 when, in 1991, he raped a 16-year-old friend of his sister. The next year, he attempted to assault a 17-year-old girl as she was walking home from a bus stop, getting arrested just over a week later when she managed to identify him to the police. Released on bail, he attempted yet another sexual assault, this time on a 16-year-old hitchhiker. He was determined. Now again, his victim managed to identify him and he was re-arrested, and eventually he'd be jailed for 5 years with a minimum of 3 to be served. Wow, what a sentence. I'm sure he'll be rehabilitated after that. Oh wait, it gets even better when he would be released early after serving just a whopping 22 months. If that boggles your mind, then click, strap yourselves in. Over the span of less than a year, from September 2000, Bayley would commit a series of assaults in the St Kilda area of Victoria. Each woman was driven to a secluded lane and attacked in his car. In April 2001, he was arrested and charged with 5 counts of rape. After pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 8 years. Bayley was eventually released after completing, a sex offender program. And then while out on parole, he just randomly bet the shit out of a guy outside a cafe. So he kind of back in, pal. He would plead guilty to that and be sentenced to a whopping 3 months. To which, he contested. He kind of would plead against as it being too harsh. No, mate! This accent's getting better. Now, investigators had this scumbag piece of shit's phone tracking the same route as missing Jill's. Detectives immediately put Bayley under surveillance and started to do their research on him. But one swift look at his background and they knew they needed to get him into custody as fast as possible. He had to be their man in the blue hoodie. Bayley was arrested by officers on the 27th of September. 5 days after Jill had last been seen.
First of the latest developments in the haunting disappearance of ABC staffer Jill Meagher from the Melbourne suburb of Brunswick. Late today, nearly 6 days after she vanished, following a night out with friends, police arrested a man.
When asked if he had anything to do with Jill going missing, Bayley, played the helpful innocent, insisting he had nothing to do with it and he'd spent the night looking for his girlfriend after they had an argument. He said he spent the night looking for his girlfriend after they had an argument, and this is his literal quote. He was looking for his girlfriend because women shouldn't walk on their own, Unknown to Bayley, police were actually carrying out a search of his home during the preliminary stages of the interview and found a SIM card in his washing. It was Jill's SIM card. When confronted with the physical evidence, Bayley's story changed and he finally admitted that he was the guy in the blue hoodie. According to Bayley, he just fucking innocently approached Jill as she was walking home and just started yapping away to her. Casual, friendly conversation by a complete stranger at about like 1:30 a.m. Then he tried to touch her, he tried to give her a little smooch, and she became aggressive with him, if you can believe that. I think he was the victim here. This caused him to see red, and before he knew it, he had strangled her to death. He went on to claim, though, he instantly regretted it. He had never, intentionally went out to hurt anybody. It was a horrible mistake, yada yada, who fucking cares? You can read the rage-inducing transcripts of when he was telling this to the police. Take your heart medication before it because you will be pissed. It has quotes such as, let me just actually get my laptop here. She flipped me off and that made me angry because I was actually trying to do a nice thing. You know that? She looked distraught, She looked like she was lost. She didn't. And I don't know, man, always try to do the right thing, most of the time, and I didn't take well to her response. This is literally the transcript, guys. He says, a lot. Don't know if you can see it, probably not, but he says it, trust me. I want to do the right thing, I don't care. I'm going to jail for a long time. I hope they bring back the death penalty before I get sentenced. Me too, pal. There's no explanation and there's no excuses for this. Alright, for her family this week it must have been hell. You know what I mean? I need to be an actor. Now the detectives, they had a hunch. You know, maybe it's like a cop thing, a gut feeling really that maybe there's a little bit more to his story than he was letting on. And that maybe it didn't happen the way he was telling them. But more importantly, they had a confession to work from, and most of all, they needed to recover Jill's body. After a little persuading, Bayley revealed, though he couldn't tell them exactly where Jill's body was, he told them he was sure if they took him to the general area, he'd be able to point it out. So late that night, the detective drove Bayley out to Gisborne, the same Melbourne town where Jill's phone was last known to have travelled. After driving around for hours, and just as the detectives were beginning to lose hope, as they turned onto Blackwell Lane, Bayley suddenly raised his head and told the driver to pull over. When asked to show them exactly where they needed to look, Bayley refused and would only point to the place he'd buried Jill Maher's half-naked body in less than 40 centimeters of soil.
And that man is 41-year-old Adrian Bayley from Coburg.
Do we know how this arrest came about? Gloria, was it as a result of the release of the CCTV footage?
Well, police are saying that the CCTV footage was a vital piece of evidence that actually helped move forward the case. And they've also said that the huge social media campaign, which was launched after the disappearance of Jill Maher, was also of extreme help to them in trying to work out what happened to Ms. Maher.
The news of Jill's body being found and the arrest of the man responsible drew a very strong reaction from both the public and the media, both positive and negative, grief and anger. Things got so intense at one point the Commissioner of Police had to publicly request that people refrain from commenting on the case on social media so as to not jeopardise any potential trial. Wonder how that went. Wow, telling people not to talk about it on social media. It's really hard to put into words quite how strong the reaction by the public was and how grief-stricken the city, probably the country, was. On the 30th of September 2012, 3 days after Jill's body was found, over 30,000 people attended a march in Jill's memory as part of the Take Back the Night movement.
Strictly friends and family inside the service. Jill's parents united in grief with her husband.
She was so precious to us and we loved her so much, and the light she brought to our lives almost 30 years ago will shine on us forever.
ABC colleagues among the mourners, the service a celebration of life. Friends turned tears of grief into tears of laughter, even standing up and dancing. Jill was learning to be a clown, her ambition to write her own comedy series. Friends said she was clumsy and goofy, but always had style.
She's the only person I've ever encountered who has actually literally slipped on a banana skin. And she was proud of it.
Jill's mother Edith spoke to the marchers after a minute's silence was held. She thanked the people of Melbourne for the support they had shown the family during the investigation and throughout the aftermath of Jill's death. It initially looked like Bayley was going to drag Jill's parents and her husband through just the good old hell that these pieces of shit usually do by saying he was initially going to say he was pleading not guilty, so look forward to a trial.
Accused of the rape and murder of Jill Maher has appeared before the Melbourne Magistrates Court. Adrian Ernest Bayley was charged before a packed courtroom over the death of the 29-year-old ABC employee.
He backtracked though pretty quickly when being reminded, oh yeah, he already told them he'd killed her. So things went from bad to worse for Bayley when a suppression order was lifted, allowing the introduction of his prior violent criminal history in any trial for Jill's murder. He basically had no chance whatsoever of getting off, so yippee, but any idea of any kind of remorse by pleading guilty was also out the window. The positive spirit that had built up in the wake of the march in Jill's honour quickly evaporated back into public outrage, when not only was the extent of Bayley's disturbing history revealed in court, a lot of fury was redirected towards the Australian parole system. You see, when I said Bayley was released from his 11-year sentence for the 5 St Kilda attacks, yeah, he was still on parole for that when he was released and committed the random assault that would get him a 3-month custodial sentence. The one he said was too harsh on him, you know, the one he was appealing against. So not only had he done horrible crimes, been out on parole, then he didn't even go back into prison. He was out on bail pending appeal for the assault when he got 3 months and said it was so harsh. That's when he killed Jill. So he was already on parole for his parole, and he was still out and about and able to do all this kind of shit show.
Disbelief is now anger, lashing out at the Adult Parole Board's failure to reply to an email seeking answers over Bayley's release. Mr Meagher wrote, "I can see the vigour you put into capriciously pouring rapists and murderers onto our streets does not extend to responding to victims of your incompetence." He continued, "Whether this is the slow-moving cogs of government bureaucracy, laziness or good old-fashioned cowardice is of little importance to me."
The situation would go from a series of unfortunate decisions to out and out, just stupid, I guess is the only thing I can think of. When it came out that shortly before he'd murdered Jill, Adrian Bayley had committed even more attacks in and around the same area. Offences that, had he been caught for, Jill Meagher would still be here. In June 2013, less than a year after the murder, Bayley would be sentenced to serve at least 35 years in prison. The Supreme Court Justice remarking during the sentencing hearing that had it not been for the last-ditch guilty plea, it would have been life without parole. Great, so you're giving him water, like he's only pleading guilty to get less years. He should be sent away for life without parole. Dickless.
Part of the reason why the judge said he gave the sentence that he did was because he said that Bayley expressed some degree of remorse. What did you think about that? I mean, did you think he was remorseful, and did you think that it mattered?
No and no. I don't think he was. I don't see how he was remorseful. I don't see how a man who continually does the same thing over and over again can be considered remorseful. No, I don't think it matters at all. Like, if it would matter in maybe some cases, but not in the case of a serial offender, not in the case of somebody who keeps doing it over and over again. If he has a little cry, I mean, I don't know what difference that makes to sentencing at all. It's baffling. It's bewildering to sit there and listen to somebody sort of coddle this man with ideas of remorse. And, you know, who cares if he has remorse?
You know, Bayley's own mother, after Jill's murder, would call into a radio show saying how she had tried to contact his parole officer, telling him, you know, he really shouldn't be out and about. Like, he's not a good soul. Maybe kind of throw him away, lock away. Like, when his own mother was the one saying he should not be in public, like he's a predator. Take the hint.
The system failed. He shouldn't have been on the streets.
And let me tell you, Neil, I went high and I told them that I had concerns. And nobody listened to me. Nobody. His parole officer didn't listen to me. I went into the city to an office at the justice system, in the justice system. Nobody listened to me.
This is before. Is this before he killed Jill?
Yes, it is.
And you can
yes, it is.
The 35-year minimum non-parole period would be extended to 43 years when Bayley stood trial for assaulting 2 sex workers and a Dutch backpacker in the months leading up to Jill's murder. What's really upsetting is that the facial reconstruction the Dutch backpacker managed to give police after the attack looks like it was Bayley. Like, you know, they did one of these facial reconstructions where they get the eyes of this person, the mouth of this person to make it a face. It was like, bam, that was him. Straight up. The girl told police that Bayley pulled up in his car and warned her he thought a car was following her. After offering her a ride, he took her away to a secluded area and he attacked her. She only managed to get away because she managed to convince him that they should go back to her place, and then she ran inside to her housemates. Another one of his victims, an 18-year-old sex worker, she had literally been reading a pamphlet about, you know, a dangerous predator, a man in the area, like, assaulting women. She had literally been reading it when Adrian pulled up. She got in, and then she was like, wow, you know, there's some fucking psychopath out there. And then he pretty much just turned, looked at her and said, yeah, you're looking at him. There's so many things, like, leading up to what happened to Jill, that if it had just been done, like, slightly differently by people with like a modicum of competence, a lot of pain could have been, you know, spared, really. The depressing thing is, if the system had just worked the way it's supposed to, if the rules had been enforced the way people expected them to be, things would have been different. It's heartbreaking to think what could have been, but it wasn't. And that ends this whole story. Sinead, Tom, he would eventually move back to Ireland without Jill. Her parents obviously would have to... There would be memorials and marches and all things for her, which is great to see. Bayley should have been sent away. Life without parole. Cut his dick off. But the one thing I'll say to cut it out is that, like, it's not all bad news. He was stabbed in prison, so... Thanks. You know, crikey, in a positive way for that one. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here watching this little video with Misha. I appreciate it a lot. That kind of wraps it up, so I'll see you like real soon in the next one. Look forward to that, I hope. Also, there'll be some more stuff coming. I'll tell you about it later on, but expect a little bit more, Mike. In the very near future, look forward to that. I'll tell you about it very, very soon. But till the next video, next week, just take care of each other, take care of yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.